We're back with part 3 of this week's reading of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible Tree of Life version, TLV, and we are wrapping up the book of Judges, the second book of the Nevi'im and the prophets, and we are reading chapters 11 through 21, and I'm hoping part 2 gets, because we were close to 24 minutes, and that's kind of pushing things a little bit there, so I'm hoping when I go to upload it, I don't have to redo any of this. So I'm going to recap chapter 13 through 16 because we're dealing with Samson and Delilah. And again, before we were ready to break here on part 2, prior to Samson being here, the children of Israel once again did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. And from the tribe of Dan came Manoah, a man from Zorah, and his wife was barren. And an angel of the Lord came upon them and actually let them know that they were going to have a son, and he was to be a Nazarite. And we kind of went over what a Nazarite was, and a Nazarite would be dedicated to Adonai, not to drink wine, strong drink, unclean things. And actually, his mother during the pregnancy was supposed to hold to that as well. So Samson was born, and he grew very strong, and the Ruach came upon him, and he continued to be very strong, and no razor was taken to his hair, and that was where his strength um, was, through the Ruach, actually, because once that hair was cut by Delilah, the Ruach actually departed from him, because he actually broke the Nazarite covenant, of not having um, a razor touch his hair, and that was the first time that happened. Well, now prior to that, there was a lion that was he slew with his bare hands. Then he came with the riddle of the lion and the honey, because when he came back, there was bees that actually were inside the carcass of this lion, and there was honey there. He had fallen in love with a Philistine woman, and as as we read, he had actually given a riddle, and she was threatened actually by the 30 men that were at the banquet, the wedding banquet, and they threatened if she did not tell them, find out what the riddle was, because they did not want to, like, they didn't want to be paying up. There was kind of like a bet that was made, and they certainly didn't want to pay up because that was very expensive back in those days anyway. Um, so they threatened to burn her and her father's house, uh, to burn them both alive. So what happened anyway is they both did, anyway, because um, she did get the riddle, the answer to the riddle out of Samson, told Samson, and then it just went out of control from that point on. Um, uh, he went and killed the people, some Philistines, and came back and paid paid them off, because actually by them guessing the riddle, he is the one that needed to pay this bet, so to speak. And so this is where things really went south. And then he took the 300 fox, lit them up, ruined the grain because he threw them into the grain of the Philistines, and so they blamed. Of course, they knew it was him, but then they burned his wife and her father. So it happened anyway. It really crazy stuff. And then later, again, they tried to come after him, and he like killed 1,000 with the jawbone of a donkey. Then he meets Delilah, and he gives a secret, and then ends up being a captive of the Philistines. And then his hair grows back, but he's actually being put on display and was being mocked and everything at a at a festival, so to speak, to Dagon, and which was their god. And he asked for strength one last time, and what happened is he tore down the pillars and crushed all the people that were in it, and he died with them. So that was the story, the long and short, and the recap very quickly of Samson. Very interesting story. Very, very interesting person. Fiery temper, which got him into some trouble, and he also, his eye for the Philistine women also got him into some trouble too, because with Delilah, he actually gave up his secrets, which was a big downfall. So we're going to go on to chapter 17, and we're going to talk about Micah. Micah's idols. Now, there was a man of the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah, and he said to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, which you also repeated it in my ears, behold, the silver is with me. I took it." And his mother said, "Blessed be my son of Adonai." And he returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother, and his mother said, "I wholly dedicate the silver from my hand to Adonai for my son to make a graven image and a molten image. Now therefore I will return it to you." So when he returned the silver to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave them to the silversmith, who made it into a graven image and a molten image, and they were kept in the house of Micah. Now the man Micah had a shrine of gods, and he made an ephod and household idols, and consecrated one of his sons to become his priest. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Now there was a young man from Bethlehem of Judah, of the clan of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. Then the man departed from the town, from Bethlehem of Judah, to sojourn wherever he could find a place, and as he sojourned, he arrived to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he replied to him, "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem of Judah, and I am traveling to stay wherever I may find a place." So Micah said to him, "Stay with me, and be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, and a suit of apparel, and your provision." So the Levite went in, and the Levite was content to stay with the man, and the young man became to him as one of his sons. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that Adonai will do me good, seeing I have a Levite as my priest." Now, chapter 18. The Danites seek a new home. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of Dan was seeking an inheritance for itself to settle in, for to that day no territory had fallen to them for an inheritance in the midst of the tribes of Israel. So the children of Dan sent 5 men from their clan out of the entire population, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and explore it, and said to them, "Go explore the land." When they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, they lodged there. When they were near the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young man, the Levite. So they turned aside there and asked him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you have here?" He said to them, "Thus and thus Micah did for me. He hired me, and I became his priest." "Please inquire of God," they said to him, "so we may know whether our way that we are going will be successful." "Go in peace," the priest said to them. The way that you are going has Adonai's approval. Then the 5 men left and came to Laish, Laish, and saw the people there living securely like Zidonians, tranquil and unsuspecting. For there was no humiliation or anything oppressive in the land. Moreover, they were distant from the Zidonians and had no dealings with anybody. When they came back to their kinsmen at Zorah and Eshtaol, their kinsmen asked them, "What do you say?" "Arise, let's go up against them," they said, "for we have seen the land. See, it's very good. Yet you're sitting still. Don't be sluggish. Go enter, possess the land. When you get there, you will come to unsuspecting people. The land is spacious, for God has put it in your hand, a place where there is no lack or anything on the earth." So from the Danite clan, from Zorah and Eshtaol, 600 men set out, armed with weapons of war. They went up and camped at Kiriath Jearim, in Judah. Therefore they called that place Mahane Dan to this day. Behold, it was west of Kiriath Jearim. From there they passed on to the hill country of Ephraim and came to Micah's house. Then the 5 men that went to spy out the country of Laish said to their kinsmen, "Do you know that in these houses there are an ephod, household idols, a carved image, and a molten image? Now therefore consider what you have to do." So they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite at Micah's house and asked him about his welfare. Now the 600 men of the children of Dan, armed with their weapons of war, were standing by the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who had gone to spy out the land went up and entered there. They took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molten image, while the priest was standing by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. Now, after these had gone into Micah's house, and taking the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molten image, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" "Be quiet," they said to him. "Put your hand on your mouth and go with us, and be to us a father and a priest. It is better for you to be a priest to the house of one man. Is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man, or to be a priest to a tribe and a clan in Israel?" So the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved image, and went along among the people. So they turned and set off, and placed the little ones and the cattle and the goods in front of them. When they were at a good distance from Micah's house, the men that were in the house near Micah's house gathered and caught up the children of Dan. They called out to the children of Dan, who turned their faces around and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you that you have called them out?" "You have taken away my gods, which I made," he said, "and the priest, and walked away. What do I have left? And how then do you say to me, 'What's the matter with you?'" But the children of Dan said to him, "Don't let your voice be heard among us, lest bitter fellows fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household." Then the children of Dan went on their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. Then they took what Micah had made, and his priest, and came to Laish, to a tranquil and unsuspecting people, and struck them with the edge of the sword, and they burned the town with fire. There was no deliverer, because it was far from Zidon, and they had no alliance with anyone. It was in the valley near Beth Rehob. Then they rebuilt the town and lived in it. So they called the name of the town Dan, after the name of their father Dan, born to Israel. However, the former name of the town was Laish. The children of Dan set up for themselves a carved image. Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the exile from the land. So they set themselves so they set them up Micah's carved image that he had made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. So crime at Gibeah of Benjamin is chapter 19. Now you can see before we go on to chapter 19, I'm going to quickly recap. And um, Judges 17:6 actually describes the tragic downslide of God's people during the time of Judges. And it basically says in those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes. So whatever they felt like doing, they did. People did whatever they wanted to do, failing to follow the laws that God had given them. They broke covenant, and they also miss receiving the blessings of God as a result. In many ways, we do see this today in practice, as the people and nations of today are not heeding to God's laws at all. We have all kinds of sin taking place, from idolatry of all kinds to abortion to drunkenness, fornication, and many other perversities that are abominations to God. In reality, the people of today are repeating the same sins of the people of ancient Israel. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's a merciful God, but at the same time, He is a God who has to judge and will judge sin. Individuals and nations must repent and return to God and His ways and receive His blessings versus continuing in a backsliding manner and risk going into judgment. History does not have to repeat itself if lessons are learned and people are wise to do what is right in the sight of God. So, what we had was chapter 17 is all about Micah's idolatry. I mean, he stole from his mother at first, and then confessed that he stole, but then she in turn uh, gave money to actually make this molten graven image, a graven image and a molten image, and that was done. And then one of the Levite priests actually, he actually stayed with him as well. And so he wasn't even following things and knowing that there was these idols in the house. Then the Danites came, and they actually stole these idols, and um, that was not a good thing either, because what they did was set up these idols in the town of Dan, which they renamed. It had been Laish, um, but they stole it. Um, and they had these graven images actually set up themselves. So now we're going to go into chapter 19, which is another interesting story. Now, this is crime at Gibeah of Benjamin. And I'm looking at 17. I think before I get into this, because this is a pretty long chapter, so I think what I'm going to do is actually pause this and come back with the next part.